Welcome. Bani Dugal is the principal representative of the Bahá'í International Community to the United Nations. She is the vice president of the NGO Committee on Freedom of Religion or Belief, past chair of the NGO Committee on the Status of Women, and past chair on the Global Forum on UNICEF. Take a listen.
This is a Religica production. RELIGICA.
Could you, for the listeners, say a little bit more about the role of women within Baha'i? You sort of alluded to it today in terms of the, not a patriarchal.
Yes, as I mentioned, we don't have clergy in the Baha'i faith, and there are elected bodies at the local, national, and international levels. And these elections happen pretty much, as you would imagine an election, but there's no electioneering, so I wouldn't be standing for office in a sense. Baha'is get together once a year, and in a prayerful way, they just write down the names of 9 individuals in their community that they believe would be best to serve the needs of the community. And I use the word serve the needs deliberately because a leader really is one who's a servant of others and not a demagogue or something, someone sitting at a pedestal somewhere. So there are 9 members elected for each local assembly, and then 9 members elected to form national assemblies. And we've seen that because the Baha'i writings talk about gender equality as such an important core element to who we are as human beings, that all women and men are created equal, all people are created equal in the sight of God. And of course, we all come from societies that have prejudices and practices that aren't, the most suited towards promoting equality. And some of that baggage comes with each of us, or we are raised with messages, good and bad, but those that sometimes perpetuate these inequalities. But as we are studying Baha'i writings and beginning to internalize those principles and qualities, we are seeing that Baha'i communities very consciously working on eradicating inequality within their communities. And now we are seeing that on these elected bodies, we are seeing more representation of women. Even the appointed arm, our international body, appoints individuals as counselors that help the community in various aspects of their life. There are more women than there are men. And so I think these messages are beginning to trickle down.
And without getting political, because I don't want to, but nonetheless, there's a trend, it seems like right now, with certain leaders across the world who are male and pushing things in an autocratic direction. Yeah. So there's a message in what you're saying and manifesting. It seems like there's a message.
Well, whenever you see change, whenever there's change afoot, there's always pushback. I think that's a natural, almost scientific rhythm of how things happen. I mean, you have, even the rivers will be flowing and they're pushing against the rocks, and gradually those rocks are going to submit and become sand. And so I think as we are changing and speaking about equality, there is that pushback. It is difficult to change an order that has existed for thousands of years, and the primacy of one part of society over another. And
you mean males over women?
Males over women. Yeah. The rich over the poor, the more powerful, however the power dynamics in a society may be established. And there will be pushback because it's a privilege that we are eroding in a sense by saying just because you were born as a male doesn't automatically privilege you. But in some parts of the world today, even a male child is celebrated, and when a girl is born, there's a sadness in the family. And that message carries through with these young children as to how they are addressed, as to the roles they are given in the family. The girls are often helping their mother and serving their brothers. And that is becoming internalized. And those are the messages that we have to change. And the kind of education, the curriculum often taught to boys is different from that of girls. So I think we have a lot of work to do, and there will be pushback, and we need to understand that and not get upset and angry and, be wringing our hands over it, because it's the natural order of things. And I think in time, as long as the good people are doing the work that they should be doing, we'll have change.
Could you say a little bit about your work with the UN? What role does the Baha'i tradition take within the context of the UN, and what the work that you're doing within that?
So the Baha'i International Community has accreditation with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. And that means we are there as a non-governmental organization. And the Charter of the UN says that there will be member states represented at the United Nations. So it's really like a club of nations. However, there will be opportunities for these nations to have interaction with the peoples of the world. And the means of the peoples of the world, as it were, to interact with the United Nations is through accreditation with the Economic and Social Council as non-governmental organizations. So we are there in that capacity. I have colleagues who also serve as representatives alongside me. And
from other religious traditions?
From other religious traditions, but also within my office. I'm not the sole representative. And in the Baha'i International Community's UN office, we focus on a number of discourses that we believe are really important. And all the discourses that are taking place at the UN are very important, but we select a few on which we focus, gender equality being one, social development being another, issues related to youth and their engagement in society, the role of religion in society, the migration discourse, and then the overarching one, which is so important to Baha'i understanding, is that of peace, because we do see that there will be a world when there's justice and peace. It'll be sometime in the future where governments will agree and peoples will be living in harmony together. But we are working, in a sense, to influence the thinking, and alongside others with other religious traditions as well that are doing some of these, efforts and working in the discourse work or projects on the ground, however they are working. And the idea is to build strong communities at the local levels, and that's what Baha'is do, work alongside others to build really strong communities that are resilient. And we at the UN office are talking about the policies that govern these people and how those need to be informed through a spiritual lens as well as that one of justice and equality.
And so you're hopeful. I mean, that's kind of remarkable, actually, because I was just reading the other day about, what's the word, dystopia. How many books about the future are written with a dystopian cast?
Yeah, but if you look in the short term, sure, there's a lot to be despondent about. But if you have the longer vision, there's I can't imagine anyone not being hopeful, because there's so much potential. When you look around, there's really a lot more good in the world. And there are some negative aspects. Those get the media attention. That's what we talk about. Mm-hmm. But there's so much good. If you just look around these halls at the Parliament of World Religions, there are these wonderful people. There's so much love and hope and faith. And I think most people in the world have a faith of some sort, and there's a belief in the divine, and we are all inspired and motivated by that. And when you wake up in the morning and go about your business, there are hardships and we're struggling together, but I think we do it because we're hopeful of what the future might hold, and the future for our children.
It's not like you're speaking in sort of a California bubble where you've never actually encountered anything difficult. I mean, especially Baha'i tradition has been persecuted. Mm-hmm. Yes, and from Iran, am I right? Yeah, so persecuted heavily there. And I think over the years, a lot of that. So can you tell people a little bit about that and how you hold that? I mean, because people could get bitter, how do you hold that?
Well, part of my work at the UN as the main representative is also defending the rights of the Baha'is in Iran, mostly, and now some of that has trickled out to the Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen, because Iran has some influence there, and it's unfortunate. But I get my inspiration from those very people because they have so much hope. And, Baha'is, wherever we live, are bidden to be obedient to our governments. And we are working to better our communities. And I was talking about building strong communities at the local levels and others. And the Baha'is in Iran, despite all of the challenges that they face, it's severe persecution. They're not permitted to go to university. They don't enjoy any of the economic, social, cultural rights that people around the world do. They can't practice their faith in the way that, people elsewhere and their other religions within Iran do, because the religion is banned. There's propaganda in state-held media against the Baha'is. If they close their businesses, they can't, for one, have government jobs. And if they're working for another company, that company comes under pressure from certain forces in the government to let go of the Baha'is. So if they start their own businesses or shops, when they close their businesses for Baha'i holidays, their licenses are revoked. Their shops are shuttered and, closed. And so they're facing challenges on a daily basis. The revolving door of arrests, they keep getting arrested, no charges, but then they let go. The bail is set so high. Many of them lose their properties because they give them up as collateral. And yet, they are probably the most inspiring people. They're hopeful. They are serving their community whenever the occasion arises. And so I derive a lot of inspiration from them.
That is quite amazing. Is there anything you can say, and within proper boundaries, whatever they are, but just sort of about your religious practice or your prayer life or something? Like, I don't know what Baha'is do. I mean, that cultivates some of this. Is there anything, since we're talking about this sort of hopefulness in a situation of inequality or oppression, what?
So I'm often asked that because, we have some beautiful houses of worship around the world. And if you visit them, they're normally very beautiful on the outside and very serene and lovely on the inside. We don't have any rituals. We don't have figurines or photos, but we do pray. We pray. We have all of our prayers actually revealed by the founder himself, Baha'u'llah, or his son, Abdul Baha. His forerunner, the Bab, also had revealed a few prayers. And so those are the prayers that we read. We have obligatory prayers that we pray each day, and that's each individual by her or himself. And we meditate and we pray, and that's an essential for every Baha'i.
And praise of God, it almost has a connotation of alignment with God or something like that. I don't know.
It's, a conversation between the soul and the divine. And I don't think that's written somewhere in Baha'i writings. That's how I see it.
Sure. Yeah. So that's beautiful. I mean, that sounds like that's where this hope you're referring to, and I can sort of irradiating, comes from. Can you think of an instance where there was some tenet of faith within Baha'i tradition that had to be reformatted because of the nature of scientific understanding?
No,
Yeah.
because I think the way the writings, and we're a young religion, I don't know if in the future there'd be some great scientific revelation, but there's nothing at this time that I can imagine. But we have a universal house of justice, and that is the reason. I mean, one of the things that international governing body does is to guide the community. So if there's some lack of understanding on our part, we would get that correction then. But
it's striking that in some, without naming them particularly, I suppose, but in some, there are some conservative wings of some religions that are resistant to the idea of climate change. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be that their idea is, well, only God could change things, so how preposterous to think that human beings could be changing something so fundamental as the climate of the globe. Having said that, is there a Baha'i sort of understanding of that and, application or work or direction?
Well, I mean,
in terms of climate change?
Baha'is my office was very present during the Paris Accords, and we've issued statements about sustainable development and how important it is for every individual to be conscious of the contributions we are making to ecosystem, but also, the footprint, as it were. I mean, what are we taking out? And Baha'is believe that, each of us must not consume more than what is our share, in a sense. And, so we are very much about sustainable consumption and sustainable development. So we've contributed towards the various agreements and worked with governments and civil society on getting a better understanding of how to treat our planet and our environment.
You've been listening to Religica. Visit us at www.religica.org.